Hello, everybody. Still awake after lunch, then. So my name is Sally Goble. I'm the head of quality at The Guardian. And the title of my talk, Perfect Software, the Enemy of Rapid Delivery. Before I start, I wouldn't mind knowing the kind of makeup of the room. So how many of you are developers? Okay. How many of you are UX? Okay. Product? Data? Okay. Project management? Okay, so good old mix. That's great. Thank you for bearing with me. For those of you who don't know The Guardian, we're the second largest online English-speaking news organisation in the world. We have around 9 million visitors a day across our website and our mobile news apps. We won a Pulitzer Prize in 2014 for our online journalism. We've got a development team of around 150 people who work on our digital products. And we kind of are generally an agile team. And we release our software around 100 times a day across all of our products and all of our environments. So 100 times a day, and that's the kind of context that I'm going to be talking about when I talk about rapid delivery. So the aim of my talk today is to persuade you that an obsession with perfect software and perfect software development is outdated, and it's unnecessary, and it's slowing us down, and it's hampering our ability to develop and deliver our software at the rate that our customers want and our business requires. And the reason that I wanted to talk about this today, and the reason I've been thinking about this, started around Christmas of last year, when our development team decided to do an Advent blog in the run-up to Christmas. And I've been kind of talking about what this means to testing for a while. And so we wrote, 25 blog posts about what the team, various people in our team are thinking about, and the projects they're working on, and the things that they're interested in. And when I started reading back over some of those blog posts after Christmas, I noticed that there was a kind of common theme that was occurring around different people from different disciplines in the building, that we were all in kind of slightly different ways rejecting the notion of perfect software in order to deliver more quickly. And I thought, there's a theme emerging here. And I thought I'd try and kind of synthesize some of that thinking and talk about what that means to us at The Guardian today. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to have a bit of water first. So I'm going to talk roughly in 3 different sections. I'm going to talk about what I mean by perfect software. I'm going to talk about what do we need to have our software to be perfect at all. And I'm going to talk about how The Guardian works with less perfection and what that means to us in reality. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to talk about what I mean by perfect software. I'm going to take you back to the golden, olden days of software delivery, round about the millennium, I guess, when the software that you consumed or that you built looked a bit like this. Sorry, the aspect ratio is obviously a bit weird. The software looked a bit like this. It came in a box, and that box was pretty indestructible if you ever tried to dispose of one of them. It came with a raft of documentation, and it came with a bunch of installer disks. Now, if you were unlucky, or if you were lucky rather, those installer disks were DVDs. If you were a bit more unlucky than that, your software came on CDs. And if you're particularly unlucky, or if you're like me and you're just old, your software came on floppy disks. And so when you got your software, you had to go through this whole physical process of getting your software. You go into a shop, an actual physical building, bricks and mortar. You'd walk into there. You'd find the software that you wanted. You'd get your money out. You'd pay with actual physical money to buy your software. You'd take it back to your computer, and you'd install it with your disks, one at a time. Installer 1, installer 2, installer 3, so on and so forth. An actual physical thing. And the result of it being a physical process like that meant that your software was only updated, once a year, once every couple of years. If you wanted to upgrade your software, you'd have to go through the whole process all over again. Go to that shop, buy the software, take it back, install it, installer 1, installer 2, and so on and so forth. It was a physical thing. And that software was perfect, right? Software that you got in that box was perfect. It had to be perfect. It came to you once a year, and the fact that it only shipped to you once a year or once every couple of years dictated the need for perfection. But what do I mean by perfection? Your software was built to last. It was future-proofed. Your software anticipated the needs of all its users. It anticipated the market. It was beautifully built. It was stable. It had amazing documentation. And, of course, it was bug-free. And it had to be like that because if your software was less than perfect, you'd have to wait a year or two or more for it to be fixed. So that kind of physical nature of the delivery of software dictated the need for perfection. So the non-negotiable rhythm of delivery of software meant it needed to be perfect. It had integrity. It had to be. But while we were busy building perfect software, something else was happening along the line. The internet was happening. So in the year 2000, when my kind of journey starts, there were 30% of the developed world had access to the internet, but that was dial-up internet. It was slow. Move forward to now, to 2015, 2016, 80% of the developed world have access to broadband internet, whether that be on their phones or on landlines. 3.2 billion internet users worldwide. And that meant that the internet started undermining our necessity to physically ship our software. And that mode of delivery changed from being physical to being electronic. We started shipping our software more frequently. Once every year or two, once every 6 months, once every 3 months, once every 2 weeks. Sounds good? Once every few days, once a day. And to now, your software can be shipped to you and updated multiple times a day, sometimes so much so that you don't even know it's been updated. It just happens. It's a new dawn of software delivery. The internet has changed the mode of delivery and the pace of delivery, and that means that development practices must change. That's what I want to say. Development practices must change. It doesn't just mean that everything has to speed up. It means we need to fundamentally rethink and reevaluate the way that we create our software. It's 2017. We don't need to package our software in boxes. We don't need to stick to those yearly release cycles. The internet enables us to deliver our software much more frequently. And I would argue that we don't need to have perfect software anymore because we can just fix it. We can just fix it in production. We don't need to wait a year. We don't need it to be perfect because if it breaks in production, we can just fix it. And that's all well and good. And I would say that even though we can develop and deliver our software multiple times a day, there's an obsession with perfect software which is stopping us from doing that. And so we need to kind of let go of these old-fashioned notions of perfection because they're slowing us and they're holding us back. And right, some disciplines within the software development lifecycle have started kind of looking at this and started kind of changing the way they develop their software to take into account the fact that we deliver and we can deliver electronically and therefore faster. So in 2001, lean product development started being talked about, an MVP. Agile Manifesto was born. Agile practices were introduced. Much later, 2008, engineering got involved in kind of looking at the way we changed our processes, continuous delivery, continuous integration, automation, DevOps. Those disciplines are changing the way that we deliver and we consider the way we develop our software. But other teams, I would say, are being left behind and are too slow because they're obsessed with perfection. And there's a tension between those teams and those disciplines that want to move fast and those teams that can't let go of their perfection. And I'm going to talk today about what those teams are and what they value in perfection and how they should change. And I'm going to talk about how that has happened at The Guardian. So in the context of continuous delivery or rapid delivery, I would call it, I'm not sure we always practice continuous delivery, but we certainly practice rapid delivery at The Guardian. We've stepped back from the idea that something needs to be perfect before you release it or even after you release it. Instead, we started removing the barriers to delivery and looking at things in production. We work towards perfection as an end point rather than a starting point. And I'm going to look at several disciplines in The Guardian and their take on perfection and what it was and how we work now and what we did to reduce our reliance on perfection. So I'm going to have a bit of a case study. I'm going to look at 3 disciplines. I'm going to look at QA, I'm going to look at UX, and I'm going to look at data. About how we made deliberate choices to reject the notion of perfection. So first of all, I'm going to look at QA. The idea of perfect software from a QA's point of view is software that has plenty of time, or with which you have plenty of time to test it to destruction. It's software which is bug-free. It's software which is fully does what it should for its users. It's software which needs to be perfect before it's shipped, or as near as possible to perfect. And that perfection is shored up by suites and suites of manual testing, of automated testing, that will give you confidence that your software is perfect before it's released. We always talk about confidence in our software being perfect before it's released. But no amount of automated testing can speed us up to the speed that we need to have in order to keep up with the pace of delivery that our engineers can do. Perfection came at a price for us. It was a bottleneck. But it's not necessary if you can fix things quickly in the context of continuous delivery. And that's what we decided to do in The Guardian. So we changed our philosophy to one of not wrong long. So in order to move faster, we kind of really cut back to the bare minimum of testing before production. And instead, we choose to fix the bugs in production rather than finding them before. We just don't worry about things before they go into production. We fix them afterwards. So in the context of fast rollout and rollback and continuous delivery, and that's the context within which we work, we have instead a kind of testing in production methodology that we use in order to guarantee the quality of our software. Because obviously I'm not just saying to you, we just ship any old rubbish. We still need to maintain the integrity of our software, but we do all of the testing that we need to in production. And we have a kind of toolbox of techniques that we use to mitigate risk of our software having released bugs. And these are kind of well known in kind of continuous delivery, continuous integration circles. So we have single feature releases. So we only ship very, very small amounts of code at a time, so that if we do have a problem within that code, we can trace it back, fix it, or roll it back. We quite often do canary releases for more risky pieces of work. So we incrementally roll out to kind of small numbers of people until we're sure that our software is good. We have feature flags or feature switches on all of our codes so that if we do release something with a problem, we can just turn it off. And we have huge amounts of QA team-led monitoring and alerting. That means that if we do release a bug into production, then we know about it quickly and we can fix it. So our policy of doing the testing after release means a few things for the QA team. It means that we run the very small number of automated tests that we do have in production post-deploy, where they're going to be more effective. So I think, you know, in a team of 150, we have about 20 products. We have 5 automated tests that run post-deploy across all of our products in total. And they kind of run on critical paths in our products. And we monitor our critical user journeys in production as well. And another thing that we do as a QA team, we kind of invest a lot of time and energy of knowing our analytics and knowing what normal looks like so that we can spot any problems if we ship them to production. And we've replaced the testers in our team with testers from our users. So we have beta programs across our mobile apps. We don't do any testing on our mobile apps either. We ship straight to our beta programs and allow our beta users to do our testing for us. So we do about 6 releases to our beta programs before we release to live. And we've incorporated our tech support user team, user help team, so the kind of the team that kind of are at the forefront of getting emails and inquiries from our users, and we've incorporated them into our QA team and into our product team more broadly, so that if our users do get in touch with our team and tell us that there are issues or problems, or if they don't like a feature, then we can feed that back to the team quickly as well. So for our QA team, imperfection is about embracing this kind of idea of not wrong long and realizing that there isn't any need for us to test things before they go live when we can test them in production. And that means we can refocus our efforts in the live environment. We can move much more quickly and we can ship more quickly to our users. I'm going to talk briefly about UX. So what does perfect mean for our UX team? So in the past, perfect for our UX team meant a massive UX lab, an extensive use of that UX lab. It meant creating fully functioning prototypes that adhere to our very rigorous design standards. It meant fully realized prototypes that we put in front of huge numbers of hand-picked, perfect Guardian users and a long, long discovery phase. But that perfection slowed us down as well. And we found out, ironically, that QA used to be the bottleneck to releasing to production. And then we were in a position where the UX team were the bottleneck. We're much more of a bottleneck than the QA team ever were. You know, they were terrified of releasing something unless they were certain that our users wanted it in the first place. You know, and ironically, the time that it sometimes took to create something that they were very, very confident that our users would want would be months and months and months. And they would go, and they would go, okay, right, fine. Now we're very happy with this prototype. Let's kind of let's ship this feature production. And it would be 6 months later and our users would have moved on. And what had been perfectly acceptable and right for our users then was no longer relevant. So instead, we decided to adopt a kind of lean UX approach where it was okay to sometimes experiment on our users. And we in fact realized that we didn't need things to be perfect before, in order to make a decision about whether our users wanted it or not. In fact, we actively discouraged perfection because we wanted to kind of get into a situation where we were doing rapid prototyping and making decisions much more quickly, and that just wasn't possible with the kind of timescales we'd had before. And so we got to a situation where we wanted to validate our ideas in days rather than in months. So what do? We decided to start adopting design sprints, which have been kind of well written about and first talked about by Jake Knapp. And the kind of the essence of the design sprints is to spend a week prototyping rather than months. So what we do if we want to solve a business problem is we get everybody involved in the product, everybody involved in a product team into a room, and we sit them in a room for a week, the whole team. And their job is to generate many, many ideas in the first day that can be used to solve a particular business problem. In fact, the more ideas that we generate and the more rough prototypes that we make, the better. So those prototypes could be a sketch on a piece of paper, they could be a wireframe, they could be a PDF, they could be a hack, it could be anything, as long as they're kind of quick and dirty. And we then take those and we test those out on users. But we don't hand pick our users and take them all down to the lab. We go out of our building. We're very lucky we're in the centre of London. We go out and we do guerrilla testing in front of King's Cross Station, where there are always hundreds of people milling around. And the very fact that we've made these hundreds or many, many multiples of prototypes and we've made them really rough is really effective, and it's essential in terms of UX, because it means that, you know, we cast the net wide. We have many, many ideas. One of them is going to land. And it also means that if our users reject a particular idea, we're not wedded to it because we haven't spent a lot of time creating it. We don't care. We just throw it away. And it's a much quicker and more effective way of finding the right solution. So when we found an idea that we think has got legs and we think we want to develop further, we start doing a bit more prototyping, but we do that with minimum dev work, right? Minimum dev work. Sometimes no dev work at all. And we use, again, lean techniques in order to find out whether these are the ideas that our users actually want. So one of the things we do are Wizard of Oz tests, whereby you take an idea, an interaction that a user thinks they're having with their computer, which is instead done by a human being. So we wanted to see whether our users would use a chatbot on our Guardian Facebook page, but rather than building the whole infrastructure, so our users could like go to this chatbot and they could type in and say, oh, tell me an article by Polly Toynbee about this, that, or the other. So instead of creating a huge machine learning infrastructure that would allow us to support that, just to see if users wanted it, we faked it. We had a Wizard of Oz test, we created the front end for it, and then a user would kind of type in and say, give me a Polly Toynbee article about this, that, or the other, and at the other end of the process would be somebody sitting in a room with Google, just going through our archives, trying to find the article for her. So we didn't have to do any development work for that at all. We found out whether it was useful or not extremely easily. The second thing we do is we do prototypes without building anything at all. So, for example, we wanted to find out whether a new app would be a popular thing for our users. We didn't build anything. All we did was we mocked up an app store window with a kind of pictures of the app and the description of it, and we put it in front of people and said, would you buy this app? Perfect way of finding easily and quickly whether your idea is a good one or not. And kind of one of the last and I think more interesting bits of this are fake door tests, which to me is kind of called 404 tests, which is essentially the kind of quintessential imperfect bit of UX, isn't it? Because what you do is you serve people up a 404 page deliberately. So we wanted to know whether our users were, would sign up for notifications of breaking news on our website. And so what we did was we filled in a form and said, sign up here for breaking news. And when people signed up for this breaking news we served them a 404 page that very nicely said, I'm sorry, we don't actually have a notification service. We just wanted to know whether you wanted it in the first place. And to me, that's kind of the epitome of imperfection in UX, and something that we embrace is working quickly to find out what our users want and when they want it. So from this point of view, from the UX point of view, the imperfection comes about resisting the temptation to make something perfect in the first place, or in fact, to make something at all, to rapidly create many ideas and to adopt a culture of continuous experimentation and continuous improvement. Finally, and briefly, I'm going to talk about data. And this is kind of fairly new thinking in our team. The idea of perfect data, right, is to track everything, is to have a massive data team, track every single interaction that your users have with you. Culture of making every decision that you can based on your data, because that's the right thing to do, right? No. We found that the amount of data is crippling us. The cost and the scale of measuring every interaction and then analyzing us is driving us mad, and it's costing us lots and lots of money. And maintaining tracking data and maintaining the integrity across multiple platforms is just like a full-time job for several people. It's slowing us down before we release, putting our tracking data in, and it's slowing down our ability to make any decisions as we wade through the huge amounts of data that we have. So instead, what we've adopted now is an idea of minimal tracking, right, where we've started to back down and cut down on the amount of data that we record, and to be more ruthless about what we track, and to ask more questions about why we're tracking things, and only to track critical paths. And what that has meant to us in reality is to learn that less is more, and relying on measuring impacts in a volatile environment, as far as we're concerned, makes just things more complicated altogether. We need to kind of realize that we need to have a hypothesis before we decide to track and measure something. And we've also come to realize that not everything can be A/B tested. And I know it's in vogue to A/B test lots of things, and we still do A/B test lots of things. But the problem is, when you have, if you have to wait to have a statistically significant result from your A/B tests, you probably waited too long. So in terms of data, our imperfection is about realizing that if you're waiting to get statistically significant data, then you've waited too long. Okay, so we've rejected the notion of perfection in all these spheres. And when I talk to people about this, they say, are you serious? And they say, how can you do that? And what do your stakeholders think? And what do your customers think? We do this in the context of being able to release our software multiple times a day, and that is a given. And we do this in the context of the fact that we're an established brand and we have millions of users. So in order to kind of find bugs in production or kind of test things on users, we're very lucky because we have a large pool of people to do that too. So we can get the results quicker than you might do otherwise. And the other thing is that our users are incredibly engaged and loyal, and they kind of want to come on that journey with us. So if somebody does write into us and say, you know, you served me that 404 page, you know, that was a kind of mean thing to do, or I found a bug in production, you know, we have great relationships with our users, and they're only happy to kind of help us make our site and our products better. As long as we kind of keep the dialogue with them open, that's a good thing to do. And what that means is, ultimately, we can ship our products and our features and our software more frequently, and our users are happier. They're happier that we ship things more quickly than they would do if we didn't ship as frequently. I mean, that sounds obvious, but it's true. And when we ship more frequently, our users are happier, and then our stakeholders are happier, and our business is happier too. So it's a kind of a win-win-win situation. So at the start of the talk, I said that the aim of the talk was to persuade you that a kind of an obsession with perfection was outdated and irrelevant, and it's slowing us down and it's hampering our ability to develop and deliver software at the rate that our customers need and our business requires. I've talked about why we don't need perfect software and why we don't need it now, especially. I think that's the thing. And I hope I've showed you that sometimes perfection is a barrier to success. But I would just say one thing. You shouldn't start with perfection, but you should end with it for sure, if you can. It should be somewhere up on the horizon. But as Salvador Dali said, you're never going to reach it anyway. And that's it. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Any questions?
I'm really deaf, so if you could talk up, that would be great.
Really interesting. Have you found that you need to take different approaches to testing for different parts of your system? For example, parts that take payments?
People always ask that. In fact, funnily enough, we used to take a slightly different approach to the payment software, the payment platform, but that was because we didn't have as many customers, so it was really difficult to use the same approach. And now we have more, thankfully, because we've been asking people for money. So it's easier for us to spot issues in production already. So we do have a slightly different approach. So in that team, we have one test that runs on deploy. So there's a post-deploy hook that runs a testing that one critical path in production. But most of our teams, we have a budget of 5 minutes, right, of automated tests that can run. And that test just runs once, and then it notifies the developer whether the test has passed or not. In another team, we have, funnily enough, our most critical team is the team that develops the platform that our journalists use to write our content. So we have our own in-house CMS and tools. And because of the nature of journalism, sometimes those tools are being used a lot, and sometimes in the middle of the night, where our Australian office might be writing content, but there's nobody in our UK office. That is the one critical part of our operation of our products, to be honest, because if we can't publish, then what are we? And so we have we have synthetic monitoring that runs in that product. So we have a test that just runs, again, it runs in production, and it's a kind of super lightweight test that takes about 3 seconds to run, and it runs thousands of times a day, 24 hours a day. It's super stable, like 99.9% reliable. So yeah, so different parts of the team have different needs. But it's all done in production. Yeah.
Hi. So I just wanted to know where you think the limit of imperfection and perfection is. So for game companies like No Man's Sky and Destiny, they got slated recently because they released these games that didn't have the right level of perfection in them, so no one used them, and Hello Games is going down the potty now because of it. So they didn't release enough. And so just wondering what your take on that is.
Again, I think it kind of comes down to lots of things. It comes down to the fact that we have a very, very loyal user base, and probably they are tolerant. But it also comes down to the fact that we only release kind of tiny fragments of code all the time, right? So we're not as kind of crazy enough to kind of ship huge features and just think, meh, it doesn't matter, it's fine. So if we do make a mistake, then it's only going to be a small one, and we need to make sure that we kind of find it super fast. I mean, and hopefully we're going to find problems before our users do. I mean, that's our aim. Our goal is to kind of find issues before our users do, and it doesn't always happen. But then if you're somebody who works in a test team and you think that, a test team never released a bug into production even though they did testing, then, you're deluding yourself, quite frankly. You know, and I think, interestingly, with us, we've taken this approach. And I think there's a thing with kind of test teams in the past where they used to do that whole kind of, we're just as guilty as throwing things over the wall as anybody else, right? You do, okay, so I did all this testing before we released to production, and it's perfect, and I know it's perfect because I've tested everything. Throw it out into production and, you know, leave it alone because you think it's fine. And what we do instead is, because we're so focused on looking at things in production, we're kind of much more likely to catch something quicker and earlier than we would have been otherwise.
So layering all of this code on top of each other, you're not doing any performance testing in lower environments. Do you find that you end up with performance issues? And if you do see performance issues, when do you decide to fix them?
No, we don't. We're massively cached, to be honest. So we don't do any performance testing in-house, and nor do we need to. We kind of rely on Fastly to kind of do that for us. So. Yeah.
With your mobile app, how do you control the number of live versions you've got out there? So, you know, avoiding things like if users have turned off automatic updates, or having too many updates so users get annoyed with the number of updates you're sending out and their data that you're using.
So in terms of, do you mean in terms of our beach program or our general users?
So general users, as you said, you're releasing 100 times a day to live, so.
Yeah, well, so not with our mobile apps. I mean, yeah, that would be mad. We release probably every couple of weeks for our mobile apps, the app itself. But we release our betas, you know, once every couple of days for our users, for our beta users. So on our iOS app, we have 2,000 on our beta. In our Android app, we have around 16,000 users in our beta app. We force them to update. And you know, when a really interesting thing happened with this. So when we first launched our mobile apps 4 years ago, we were still doing manual testing. We tested everything rigorously. We shipped it to production. We had a really hideous bug that was in our iOS app, and nobody in the office could reproduce it. We spent about 5 or 6 weeks trying to reproduce it in-house, and we had no idea. Users kept coming in, getting in touch with us saying, you know, this app's terrible. And so we put in, so then we were kind of panned in the app stores, and we put a pop-up in the app saying, if you like us, please give us a good review, and if you don't, then tell us why. And then we got all these inundated with all these emails from people telling us why they didn't like the app, and it was a new app. And we got back in touch with every single one of those users and said, do you want to be on our beta program? Help us make the app better. And then we kind of got thousands of people from those emails onboarded into our iOS app. And so many people want to be part of the betas that, you know, we have this kind of switch that we switch remotely that brings a pop-up onto the app. Every time the kind of numbers start to dwindle, and we purge people from our betas if they haven't updated it for a few times. We have to have that switch on for about 2 or 3 minutes, and we get a few thousand people asking to be part of the beta program for us. So, you know, our users, because they're so loyal, they're like really happy to be part of that program with us. And we kind of continually monitor the stats to see how many people are on different versions of the app. Luckily for us, kind of most of our users upgrade. It's a numbers game, you know.
Hi. So with the continuous delivery journey or the rapid release journey, as you started off, have you found that you had to introduce different gated tests in order to avoid anything going to even the beta users, or is that just a case of releasing and hoping for the best?
Pretty much. I mean, we do peer reviews, our code peer reviews, but other than that, no. Anybody in our department. So we have our own in-house deploy tool, which is a web-based app. Anybody in the department can deploy to any of our environments, including production. But the responsibility for that code after you've deployed, after you've shipped, is yours, right? So We don't have an operations team. All of our team own, everything from the infrastructure to the code to the monitoring to the analytics. So, if you deploy something that's, causes a problem, then it's your responsibility. With great power comes great responsibility.
Sorry, so you didn't have to change the attitude of the working hours in terms of having the developers be on standby?
If you press the button to do a deploy, then it's your responsibility to make sure that that feature or that piece of code hasn't broken anything, right? So if you deploy something at 6 o'clock on a Friday evening, that's your choice, right? Nobody's going to say, don't deploy at that time, but the understanding is if you want to do that, then you stay and you make sure that it's fine, and you've got all the monitoring and all the tools to do that, but that's your responsibility. Nobody's going to say, don't do it. But, it's up to you. If you don't want to go to the pub, then deploy. But the responsibility is for you.
Did you get any pushback from developers who wanted to keep unit tests at all?
We do have some unit tests. Right. I wouldn't be able to testify to the percentage across all of the products. We don't stop unit testing, obviously.
The Agile Manifesto is very heavy on, I'm paraphrasing here, but basically the only thing that's worth doing is working software. I mean, particularly your UX section effectively was saying there's a whole stack of other things that we can do that actually are quicker and easier and almost as good. It's really your thoughts about that and where, my personal view has always been the case, there's stacks of other stuff that you can do to find stuff out rather than building working software. I just wonder whether you'd agree with that.
Yeah, no, well, in that context of what I've said about UX, then no, I don't agree with it. Yeah, completely. But, getting from the idea of solving a business problem to creating working software in production, that should be as slow as possible. And if it's going to take 6 months, then no, that's not the only, criteria. Just disagreed with the Agile Manifesto on Agile on the Beach. It's not good, is it? Never been invited back.
We've got time for another one. So that was really interesting. I work for a software company that develops software for other customers, so not an internal development operation. Can you see this working in that sort of relationship where you've got customers wanting you to develop software, or is it really depend on whether you've got an internal in-house team that does the development for you?
No, I think it depends on the method of delivery. I think that's all that matters. I mean, if you're creating software for your customers, and you can say, well, you can have like one release in a year, but it's going to be super perfect, or you could have like 12 builds, 24 builds. We're going to work with you. What was any stakeholder going to say is the answer to that? And I think they'll say, give me the software more frequently. I think so. I don't see why it couldn't. It's not going to work in all industries, right? And I didn't say this today, but clearly, if you're working in the nuclear power industry or, aviation, don't use this method. just saying. But I don't see why not.
This is the last one, I think.
Hi. Based on what you're saying now, I think the idea of perfect software is driven by a trade-off an organization does between quality and productivity. So to a certain extent, you will go slower to achieve a certain level of quality.
Yeah.
So, and this is associated to what you're saying now about the nuclear reaction. So for a nuclear reactor, in a nuclear reactor, the productivity is less important than quality, for example, and the company itself will make its trade-off. So,
but is I mean, is delivery now in this, you know, in 2017, is being able to ship your software and learn in the kind of the context of kind of society that's changing all the time, and technology is changing all the time. Can you afford to go more slowly? I don't think you can.
Well, let's say you're in a very competitive market, and you're ending up introducing like it's lower level of quality, and then you have two products in hand. The customer will go to the other one, especially in very competitive markets. What you said about the client base or the readers of The Guardian being loyal to The Guardian, you won't have this problem.
So I'm not saying actually have rubbish software. You know, I'm not saying make your software rubbish. I'm not saying keep the software quality down. In fact, you know, the quality of our software, all of the teams that are involved in shipping our software are bigger now than they were, you know, 5 years ago. The QA team used to be 6 and now it's 12. The UX team used to be 4 and now it's something insane like 14. You know, those teams are bigger, and you know, I guess we're trying to get to perfect in the end, but we've got to go a lot of tiny kind of steps through that. And I think, you know, nobody's saying make it less good. And it takes, in fact, it makes more people to kind of ensure quality as you have this kind of casual starting point. I'm just saying don't make it perfect before you ship it. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying don't make it perfect. I mean, I know the kind of title says it's not perfect, but don't make it perfect at the point of delivery, right?
Okay, thanks, Sally. Everyone put your hands together and